Okay, I'm going to ask you guys to take your seats. We're going to start in just a minute. If anybody wants snacks, now's your chance. They're over there. Water, Hey. I'm handing her the mic, right? I know. I think she's ready then. She's getting there. She's there. All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Estella Inda. I want to thank you guys for attending. This year is the 100th commemoration of Black History Week and now Black History Month. I am one of the librarians that helped plan a lot of our Black History Month activities. This ended up being a great honor to work with Dawn for the AACNA Center, and I'm now going to introduce Catherine Blackmore-Reyes, the director of the AACNA Center.
Thank you and welcome. And thank you for joining us for this program on the NAACP Advocating for Justice. My thanks and appreciation to all my colleagues that are in the background, but especially to Estela Inda, who is really taking the effort in leading this event, working with Dawn for this exhibit. So thank you, Estela. So my name is Catherine Blackmore-Reyes. I am the director of the Africana, Asian American, Chicano, and Native American Studies Center in the library. It's on the 5th floor, a space that was demanded by students, faculty, staff, and community in the 1970s, and the foundation was created in 1982. This space, this is a space that has compromiso to our students and to our community. I hope you have visited the AACNA Center while also exploring the year-long exhibits we host. I also hope you've had a chance to view the exhibit. Dawn Spears, a San Jose community member for many years, will tell you her story as to why she started collecting items. We are fortunate that Professor Michael Cheers brought her to our attention for this exhibit. Collecting is important. Professor Cheers wrote in his introduction to this exhibit that Dawn didn't collect for monetary reasons. She collected for the history. In this case, the history of African Americans in the United States, which has many avenues to explore and develop. Here, Dawn documents the NAACP and the organization's work in activism in the betterment and challenges of Black lives. And the NAACP is 100 years old in 2026, as is celebrating Black Heritage Month. But as we all need to say, Black heritage or Black history is every day and not just meant for 1 month. Professor Cheers also mentioned Reverend Jeff Moore, who was a leader in the Silicon Valley NAACP chapter. Reverend Moore unfortunately passed away in 2024. He was a beloved civil rights activist and devoted his life to fighting for social justice and human rights. Important figures are not always historical figures. They are our contemporaries. During Reverend Moore's memorial, California Senator Dave Cortese, representing Santa Clara County, spoke to an action requested by Reverend Moore. He asked for a box to be removed from the city employment applications. It asked the applicant if they had been incarcerated. This box, Reverend Moore advocated, created a bias for people who were trying to move forward. That box was removed, a simple box and yet impactful. As you listen to Dawn Spears, listen to what you can do, not for yourself, but for the future. Like Reverend Moore, be part of change to better our lives. And like Dawn, bringing history to new generations. Please welcome Don Spears.
Hello, thank you. First, I'm going to tell you I'm not an expert on the NAACP because that would take a year, 2 or 3. That's how prominent this organization is. I'm talking from a collector's point of view and how it impacted my collection. So I'll start off with my logo. I don't know if you can see it, but my logo, this is my logo, Black Legacy Images. And people have many times asked me, why is it red, white, and blue and not Afrocentric? First of all, because it's American history, and that's the color of the flag. Second, also it has the arrows because the past is connected to the future. So I did this logo on my own, and it's red, white, and blue because it's American history. I started collecting over 30 years ago. What happened is my husband and I've always been a collector. Sometimes in the beginning it was hats, and then I went to brooches. I just had to collect something. That was in my mindset. I don't know, it's in my DNA, but that's what I did. And then one day my husband and I, about 30 years ago, went to an antique store. And he was and I, both of us, and we had some friends, and we were looking around. And then he pointed out this poster to me. And I looked at the poster, and it was captivating because she looks young, but yet she looks old. She looks young, but yet she looks tattered. She also has the stereotypical cotton and banjo. And then to top it off, it says, Pastime in Dixie. So I said, I got to know about this poster. There must be something more to it. So my husband said, well, let's just buy it. He purchased it for me. Yay me. And then we went and we were looking around in other antique stores, and we couldn't find anything else that was interesting. So what ended up happening, we went to another city that was close by. I walked in, looked around, and then all of a sudden I stopped in my tracks because I saw a book. The name of the book was Black Americana by P.J. Gibbs. I opened it up and I was just fascinated how many objects were available that I had no idea. That book at that moment, at that second, became my wish book. And I have never, ever stopped adding to my collection. And I don't think I ever will. Poor husband. But it is what it is. So that's how I started collecting. That's been my passion. And as Catherine was telling you, I don't collect for monetary values. I collect for history because most of the items that I collected have taught me something because they're not in history books. History books are written by not so much historians, but the winners. And so the losers aren't always included. So I want them to be included. When I was younger, my grandkids would come and I would give them lecture after lecture. You should have seen their faces. They were exhausted. They're like, grandmother, I'm so tired of this. Are you going to ever stop? Yes, I'm called grandmother. And I said, nope, I'm never going to stop. I kept going and going. Now they're in their 30s and they thank me. They say, thank you, grandmother, because I know more than people that come from Black cities like Chicago know. And that's because of you. I can walk proudly, and that's because of you. Nobody can come and tell me a song and expect me to dance because I already know the lyrics of the song. And I'm so honored to be their grandmother, and I appreciate that they said thank you. I'm here today because in my collecting journey, I came across postcards that just left me in tears, left me totally emotional. Some of them were lynching cards, some of them were naked children. I mean, the gamut of these postcards are overwhelming. But I stopped again when I saw lynching postcards. And then I started once again, because it's not so much in the history books, even though the Springfield riot is, the reason behind it and the story is not there. So I said, oh, I got to know the story. What is the purpose? Who would do this? Who would take pictures of lynching people, murdered people, and give them out like they were a tourist attraction, like they were on the beach? I didn't understand it, so I researched. The Springfield riot took place in Abraham Lincoln, the emancipator's hometown, on August 14th and 15th in 1908. Sorry. The North, like the South, thought Blacks should remain in their place, unequal, and separated. During that time, before the riot actually started, there was a white lady by the name of Mabel Hallam. Today, we might call her Karen. And I read the new generation might call her Jessica. So whether she was her real name, Mabel, or she was a Karen, the bottom line is she lied. She said a Black man by the name of George Richardson raped her on August 14th, 1908. Later that day, he was in a lineup, and she looked at this Black man and said, I think you are the man, and you are going to have to prove you're not. Within hours of that statement, a mob formed outside the jail that was holding Mr. Richardson. There was also a young gentleman in there by the name of Joe James. He was 19 years old. And once again, he was accused of robbing and murdering a white man named Clergy Ballard. Mr. George Richardson arrived to the jail and he saw Joe James. I don't know what they said, but I know they probably looked at each other and just, here we are. The county sheriff knew what it could be like when a white mob formed. So he asked Harry Loper, and that's his shop when they finish, if he would take the two Black men out of Springfield, Illinois, because he did not want to happen what he knew probably would happen once they got a hold of the two Black men. When he looked out and saw those thousands of people, he knew something was going to happen. So when the mob found out, oh my God, they had the audacity to move these Black men when we want to be the judge, the jury, and the executioner? How dare they? So at that moment, violence erupted. They burned down Loper's restaurant. I don't know this very well, so what I'm going to suggest is I'm going to talk about postcards. Later on, maybe you can go through them, or you can go upstairs and see the actual postcards. They burned down Loper's restaurant business. Why? Because he helped remove the Black men, and they didn't get their vigilante justice. As you can see in this thing, the car that he drove in you can't tell what it is. And back then in 1908, a lot of people did not have cars, but Mr. Loper did. Not only did they burn down Mr. Loper's shop restaurant, they also took a gentleman by the name of William Donovan. He was a successful Black man. He was 84 years old. They beat him. They cut his throat. They slashed his throat, and then they lynched him, an 84-year-old man. So we're talking about people's grandparents. They took this old 84-year-old Black man and took his life based on a Karen statement. They were also upset that he at that time was married to a white woman, but he had been married to her for 30 years. But they didn't like it, but they didn't have a reason to do anything about it until Mabel said that Black man did that. And it gave them the reason they needed. And even some of the rioters, mobsters, knew Mr. Donegan. Not only did they do that to Mr. Donegan, when I just think of my grandmother at 84 years old, so sometimes, excuse me, I'll get emotional in this, but that's because I'm a Black woman and I have a Black grandmother, I have Black brothers and sisters, I have Black friends. So talking about this sometimes for me can become personal and I get emotional. They took another gentleman. Let me see if I can find the picture. Okay, am I going the wrong way? They took another Black gentleman by the name of Scott Burton. He was a barbershop owner. Once again, we're not talking about somebody for handouts. They weren't asking for anything. These were businessmen. And he had a barbershop. And they didn't like that. How dare Black people have more than us? And a lot of the rioters were poor white people. So they burned down Scott Burton's barbershop. They beat him, they dragged him, and yes, they lynched him. The postcards that I have on display reflect the racial violence and public spectacle discussed today. And then to top it off, a Black baby died because her family was running for shelter and they didn't find it. So she died while her family was looking for shelter. White crowds treated lynching like events or celebrations. People brought their children. Now we're talking about people getting lynched, murdered, but they thought, oh, these aren't human beings. I could bring my children. So when these children grew up, what do you think when they saw Black people? Did you think they saw us as a human being? No, because they grew up seeing us lynched, burned, and whatever else was necessary. Not only that, if you see some of the postcards, you'll see people going, smiling. Not only that, they would take fingers and limbs home as souvenirs. So after they killed us and I'm talking about my ancestors, not me personally, they would chop off a finger and say, hey, I got me a black man's finger that was just lynched. What it did was reinforce the idea that Black lives were disposable and owned. For me personally, the postcards are chilling because they show how normalized brutality was. People mailed them like vacation postcards, as I said earlier. Like the idea of sitting on a beach. Oh, I was in Santa Cruz and I saw this lynching and they decapitated him, and I just want you to know I was there. The Springfield riot was one of the worst riots in America's history. Black residents in the city resisted the violence, but over 2 days, many were killed and large amounts of Black-owned homes. Why don't Black people have homes? Why do we get to come here and we do so well and these Black people have nothing? You know why? Because when we did, they would burn it down. They would do everything necessary to make sure the next generation, in other words, generational wealth, know the story. As a result of this, many Black-owned homes, business was restored, and Black families were forced to flee the city. And guess what? Many never returned. Riots like the Springfield riot contribute to the long-term loss of Black wealth. It helped explain why racial gaps in net worth still exist today. I hope you heard me earlier. Still exists today. The riot of 1908 was one of many violent white mob attacks. There were several. That was only one. To name a few, there was the Tulsa Race Riot, also known as Black Wall Street, the Rosewood Massacre, and the Atlanta Race Riot. In each of these cases, white mobs used rumors or accusations as justifications to attack residents, burn homes, and destroy businesses. Thank you. The attacks were not random outbursts of violence. They were deliberate efforts to imitate Black communities, erase their economic gains, and reinforce white supremacy. News about the riot spread across the United States when a white gentleman named William Walling, a labor activist and writer, heard about the riot. He was inspired to write 2 articles. One of the articles was Race War in the North. In the article, he stated it was important to revive the spirit of Lincoln. He asked the question, who realizes the seriousness of the situation? When a white woman named Mary White Overton read it, she responded and she suggested that they act together in concert. Walling decided to host a meeting in his New York apartment. The riot happened in Springfield, Illinois. The meeting happened in New York. That meeting took place in January of 1909. In attendance were 3 white people, Walling, Mary White Overton, and a gentleman by Henry Moskowitz. A few weeks later, Walling put out what they call a call for civil rights leaders of all nationalities to come together and meet. When that took place, the 3 original people from the first meeting, Wallings, Overton, and Moskowitz was there, members of the Niagara movement, and one of those members was W.E. Du Bois, along with other prominent Black attendees, including Mary Church Terrell, Ida B. Wells Barnett, and Bishop Alexander. These people and others were in attendance the day the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People was established. That day, the organization took the bully pulpit to push for the abolition of segregation and racial caste distinction. There's so much about the NAACP that I could go on and on, so I picked a couple of things, incidents that interested me while I was researching. In 1915, the NAACP lawyers won a court case that declared the grandfather clause was unconstitutional. What is the grandfather clause? It allowed people to vote if their grandfather voted. Well, you know, that left us out because we just got out of being enslaved. So we didn't get to vote. And we got to think, now we're talking Black men, right? Because Black women didn't get to vote until later on. People's whose grandfather had voted in the past were vote because Black Americans' grandfather had just been enslaved, as stated earlier, could not vote. The law unfairly blocked Black voters and was ruled illegal. In 1919, the National NAACP published a study on lynching and racial violence of the previous 30 years. It supported the Dreyer anti-lynching bill, which would have made lynching a federal offense and ensure the people who were lynching and the lynch mob would face murder charges. Its passage was halted by a filibuster in the Senate by Southern Democrats. Yes, I said Democrats. What was Lincoln? A Republican. What were Blacks back then? Republicans. So yes, it was the Southern Democrats that formed the filibuster. Black Americans did not change their affiliation to become Democrats until the FDR deal, and more so during Kennedy's election. 1 year before the Civil Rights Movement in 1933, and I'm going to stop because a lot of times people go, oh, let's get over it. That was back then. So now I'm going to talk about 1953. I was born in 1953. So for me, it wasn't back then. It was my life. It was my life. Thurgood Marshall argued Brown versus Board of Education before the Supreme Court. He argued segregated schools were inherently unequal, which violated the 14th Amendment equal protection law. On May 17, 1954, I was 11 months old. Chief Justice Earl Warren delivered a unanimous opinion that in the field of public education, the doctrine of separate but equal had no place. Thurgood Marshall was, excuse my French, a hell of an attorney. He was often called Mr. Civil Rights. He won 29 of his 32 cases. And we're talking about 29 dealing with us, Black people, myself, not us, I should say. That gentleman, Thurgood Marshall, later became the first African American Supreme Court justice in 1967. Once again, it's history, but I lived it. And some other people in this room lived it. During the Civil Rights Movement in 1954 through 1968, the NAACP was the leading organization. Activism, legal challenges, lobbying, and great roots that ended segregation and protected voting rights. The prominent leaders during that time was W.E. Du Bois, as I said earlier. He was a founding member. Roy Wilkins, he now has a stamp. And Medgar Evers, he was a field secretary. Unfortunately, he was assassinated in 1963. I was 10 years old. So please stop saying, oh, that was back then. Get over it. We can't get over it because we lived it. We lived it. We're never going to get over it. For some of you, it's history. For others, it was our lives. The NAACP is responsible for many of the rights of people of all nationalities enjoy today. Although it was founded as a biracial organization without Asian members in its early leadership, the NAACP, it was called Colored People. It fought for everybody, all rights of minority. Its legal victories also benefited the Hispanic community. If you don't mind, can we just take a moment? I'm not going to take long, but I'd like you to just think of a lot of things that you enjoy today. If you're not a white male, that you have because of the NAACP. I'm going to go back to Richardson. Richardson was eventually released after the riot when Mabel Haben, aka Karen, admitted that she had fabricated the accusations of rape against him. Unfortunately, the 19-year-old James was not spared. He was convicted by an all-white jury and hanged at Sangamon County Jail a little bit over 3 months later after the riot on October 23rd, 1908. I'm going to end because I want to read this. I want to make sure I get all my points across. The Springfield riot reflects a broader historical pattern. So long, Black Americans have repeatedly worked to build generational wealth through businesses, land, and strong communities, only to see that progress undermined by violence, discriminatory laws, and systemic racism. Racism does not only harm the oppressed, it also shapes the psychology of those who benefited from it. Maintaining power requires fear, justification, and control. And those patterns are passed down through families, institutions, and social norms. people rarely give up power willingly. And when overt racism becomes unacceptable, it often reappears in subtler forms. The next time you catch yourself consciously or not labeling Black people or any people of color as lazy, violent, or undeserving, I challenge you, stop and ask yourself where the story comes from. Many of the rights we rely on today, voting, education, labor protections, and more, exist because Black Americans fought for them. Sometimes we call it, you on my shoulder. And yet those contributions have been repeatedly erased, undermined, or destroyed. If progress looks stalled to you, it isn't because of the lack of the Black people's effort. It's because every time momentum was built, someone works just as hard to tear it down. Thank you. Unfortunately, I have to ask this. Are there any questions? Yes.
It's not question, it is a comment. After the Springfield riot of 1908, there was not another Black lawyer in Springfield, Illinois, until the 70s, when Theodis Lewis, who was a friend of my brother and his wife was a friend of mine, went to Springfield and became a lawyer there rather than in Chicago, because he said people needed him there. But that was in the 70s. So it's a long time, from 1908 until the mid-70s. And then he did become the first Black judge in Springfield, Illinois. And Theodis has since passed. But I just thought you should realize how long it has taken for Southern Illinois to get, they're not even back where they were in 1908. It's been a long time.
It was an awesome presentation. But my question is, while putting this exhibit together, was there something that stood out for you that was just something you didn't know before that was just amazing? And was any of that like connected to today?
One thing that stood out to me, I was born in Des Moines, Iowa, so racism was prevalent, but there wasn't enough of them for us to care, enough of us for the white man to care. So one day I asked my mother, Mom, I don't recall seeing any segregation signs. You know what she told me? We didn't need them. We just knew. And on that, in San Jose, I know you're here and you're going, oh, not in San Jose. Well, in San Jose, in the 1960s, Woolworths was boycotted because of discrimination. So I know a lot of you think, oh, that was in North Carolina, Greensboro. Woolworths was segregated across America. There was a gentleman by the name of Ben Gross. He was the first African American to serve as mayor of Milpitas. And he was also the first African American to predominantly lead a white city in San Jose. He was successful. But just because you're in California, there were slaves, they were enslaved people in California. Everything that happened everywhere else happened here. So the idea that, coming here, I'm not thinking Woolworths, can't go in. By the time I got here, I was walking in Woolworths. And I remember Woolworths. Does anybody remember Woolworths? Yeah. There was a time we were segregated and couldn't do it.
Where's your postcard presentation located?
The exhibit is on the 5th floor in the elevator lobby as you exit the elevator. So it's right there in front in that area.
I also want to thank you for, mentioning Jethro Moore, Reverend Jethro Moore. And but I was wondering too, were there any other San Jose NAACP historical figures that also stood out?
Not at the time, because I was looking at the NAACP on a general level versus San Jose, but I'm sure there's one. You mentioned one to me. Go ahead. Tell me. Inez Jackson. She helped lead the boycott. So the rights you're enjoying today, if you're not white, you're on the black shoulders. Sorry. So maybe if you get on the elevator with a black person, try not to grab your purse and run to the corner.
Mentioning Inez Jackson, she was a legendary figure in San Jose. She came here from Oklahoma as a college graduate, a teacher, but she could not get a job in San Jose as a educator. And that was in the 50s. So her alternative was to become a postal worker. And so we don't have to go back in history to the East Coast or the South. It's right
Absolutely.
here. My family migrated from Oklahoma in the 40s, and they went to the San Joaquin Valley, where they could buy land. But I was born there later, went to school, but Blacks could not live in the town. So segregation is rampant in California as it was elsewhere in the United States.
I know you don't feel that way, but I want to tell you a story about a friend of my husband's. He lived in, where did Carl live? Valero, Tulare. Okay, so he was a white guy and he was my husband's friend and he lived in Tulare. So he told my husband this story. He said one day a black postman, now we call them mail carriers, back then they were postmen, was coming to deliver mail to his house and his dog ran out. And he said, "Come here, nigger, come here." Because that was the name of his dog. We're talking California, a dog named Nigger. There's a Newsweek magazine that on the cover, it says Champ Baron, Nigger Dog. Any way to dehumanize us, they did. And you don't get to hear our stories because the winners write the story. So instead of hearing history, guess what you hear? His story. Ask some of the living people that lived it. Learn history. Research for yourself. Because history books do not tell history. They tell what they want you to know. Any more questions? Thank you again.
So I want to comment on the postcards. It's something I shared with you. So I first saw the postcards going to the King Center in Atlanta. I was at a librarians conference, and it was the first time I had seen the postcards. And it really, I have to say, it shocked me. But they had also had Strange Fruit playing. And I had heard the song before, but I had never heard the song before. And I was, those are the things that you're kind of like, well, how stupid am I? Kind of thing, that I'm not connecting these dots, that even as somebody who's educated and part of, knowing ethnic history, as a Chicano studies student, as somebody, as a librarian who does ethnic studies, I felt really dense at that moment. But the same thing that got me about those postcards was the cheering, the smiles behind the lynched bodies, the burning. So I did an exhibit at my library at Sac State, and with these postcards, and I was critiqued by a faculty member saying, Black History Month is about celebration. So I'm wondering, given the details that you provided in, and I mean, I think it was important detail, and I still think that exhibit that I did was probably one of the most important exhibits that I've done in my career as a librarian. But I was, how do you respond to that kind of critique from colleagues that are saying that's not the type of history we need to learn about?
Because they don't want to know the truth. I mean, you can't respond. The only thing you could do is say history is what it is. It's not your story. It's not to make you feel comfortable. It's only to tell the truth. And if the truth makes you uncomfortable, so be it. But guess what? The truth must be told. I kind of wrote a little book. It took me a long time. I really try not. Oh, it's turned off. Let's try. It's just a picture book, because for many years people have asked me. By the way, my collection is over 25,000 pieces. I donated to the National Museum in Washington, D.C. As my husband and I say, we live with the collection. So I did a little book. I don't really like promoting it, but I did this book. It's $45. That's how much I paid, because I'm not a big person. So, I had to, more books you buy, the less you pay. Right. So I didn't have a lot to buy. So I had to pay more. So, oh, I guess I can.
I really want to thank Don. Oh, do you have a question? We'll get you the mic there.
I want to just thank you for your strength in preserving and collecting all that you have. My body were on the news constantly dying, and there was one in particular that I just cried, like I had seen enough, and there's just so much to take in, and I'm like, if you're not of this, you don't understand. You know, like that's all I can think of. Like if this does not impact you, like you're so disconnected. And so I want to acknowledge that this must take a toll on you. Because we see your presentation and we see your fight, but we don't see your tears. We don't see the times where you may have to remove yourself for a while. Like we don't get that process. And so I just wanted to acknowledge that I'm sure that that exists. And I wanted you to be able to tell those who don't get to see that part. What is that like?
When I first started collecting, I couldn't talk about it. I had to cry. I had to be angry in my own space. Because in the beginning, if I would have came out, guess what I would have been called? An angry Black woman. So I had to go through the process. I come across some artifacts and I still cry. I will always cry. My anger is less, but it hasn't left. But I'm telling you, Pastor, I could not come out and talk about it for 15 years. I didn't want to come across as an angry Black woman. I wanted to talk about it without crying. I wanted you to hear it from an educational view versus an emotional view. And those emotions will always exist. Always. You can't help it. I'm human. I'm not a robot.
I'm born in 42. So I've had relatives in my family that can really describe personal knowledge. That's when you really break up, you know, when they talk about bodies across the railroad tracks. So I think there are people like you. And like I said, I was born in 1942. So I really, my grandparents and great-grandparents, they could talk about it. Yeah. So, and that's really too hard to deal with it. But one thing I've done over the years is I've tried to take my energy and look at initiatives. I've done a timeline that shows all the initiatives across the United States, who benefited from these initiatives that came about so-called for us, but these initiatives that passed benefited poor white people as well as Black people. So I try to stick to the Black and more. It's more Black and white. It kind of takes the emotion out of it. So I feel good about what is there because of our fight, our struggles.
That's why we put our heads up high because you want us to look down. Okay, we're never going to look down. We know history, not.
They're still watching you. They're still watching you.
I really appreciate you guys coming. And I'm going to ask again, the next time you see a Black person, look at them as the human, think of their story, and think about the history you think that is. Is it really? Is it really?
Okay, so I really want to thank Dawn. When she came, when we met, a month ago, with all her items, she didn't want to talk. She almost didn't even want to really even help us sort of lay out the story of the materials. And so, I think for her, it was a bit of a process, and I understand that sort of having to tell a story that sometimes, as we know, is very difficult. And I want to thank Dawn for sharing a journey with us. I think as a community member that has shared her collection, it has been a unique path that we have been able to share with her. and it's been a very nice, it's been a collaboration that I think will go with one of our favorite exhibits that we've been able to host in this space. So thank you. So I'm going to pass this now to my colleague.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming. For you, those of you, I only have a couple magnets, but to highlight our Black Spartans for this month, Pharisee Hall magnets, I would like to give to those, especially those that asked some questions and had the conversation and shared their history with us. Thank you for that. Please, if you have the time, go up to the 5th floor, see the exhibit. It was a pleasure to curate, along with Dawn, with Kathy, to put up the history, to carry on some of the research that I was able to carry on from the California room out into this space with Reverend Moore's history that I got to learn about. So it was a pleasure to do this exhibit, and I know you won't add to your collection. And thank you. And if you didn't, please do the check-in just so we can keep your emails and hopefully keep in contact with you as we do some more of this work. Thank you.
For the folks who ask questions, definitely get a magnet. Thank you.